Welcome to the SENDcast. My name is Dale Pickles. I'm one of the directors at B Squared and the host of the SENDcast, the podcast for special educational needs and disability. Each week on the podcast, we talk about a different topic within the world of SEND to improve our knowledge, to provide support to professionals working in schools, and to empower parents. In this episode, we're discussing the effective use of visuals to aid communication. And discussing this with me is Kerry Thalia, the founding director of Discover Inclusion. Kerry is an autistic ADHD business owner who creates resources that support SEND children and young people to access learning, communication, and play. This SENDcast is created and produced by us here at B Squared. We help to show the small steps of progress pupils with SEND make. We help schools to show progress for a wide range of abilities and ages. We have a range of frameworks to suit learners from birth all the way through to 25 with our Steps for Life framework that assesses functional academic skills, employability skills, and life or independence skills. For the most complex learners working within the engagement model, our engagement step can build a profile of a student's needs and show the progress they are making. Visit the B Squared website or click on the meeting link in the show notes to book a meeting with me so I can take you through our assessment software and show you what it can do. Now, let's get on with the podcast. In this week's show, we're discussing the effective use of visuals to aid communication. My guest this week is Kerry Thalia, the founding director of Discover Inclusion. Kerry is an autistic ADHD business owner who works to close the gap between research and practical teaching. Kerry is currently completing her master's in inclusion as well. At Discover Inclusion, Kerry has created a range of resources that support SEND children and young people to access learning, communication, and play. Welcome to the show, Kerry.
Hi, thank you for having me.
You are welcome. So visual aids sit in this really, really weird place that schools don't fully embrace. They think they are going to use them as you need them and then remove them. It's like, we've got to get them off the visual timetable. We've got to get them off this. Yet in adult life, we use visual aids everywhere, much more than we use written text. So traffic lights, we wait for the green man before we cross the road. We don't look for the word toilets. We always look for the image of that man and woman in a restaurant. We're just looking for the symbols. And the list goes on. That is just literally a couple. Even on your phone, you're using icons.
Yeah, absolutely. And the amount people use emojis.
Yes. Yeah. I think schools have forgotten that actually more and more we're going to a much more visual world with our communication because it is really easy to access, really easy to understand. And also international languages, for different languages, we all recognize the golden arches on McDonald's.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's an interesting name for it called the hierarchy of communication. So when you start, the initial things is those real world objects, the things that we see and we use every day. And then you can start using like small world objects. Imagine like a play toilet for like in a doll's house or something. And then we move on to photographs, which is how we would communicate where we're going to someone. If we're saying, oh, I really like the look of that Airbnb, and you send them a photo of it. And then you move on to kind of pictures and symbols, which is where Discover Inclusion sits. And that's kind of where we see like widget symbols and all of the kind of illustrations, but often forgetting that there's stages before that.
Yeah.
And then I think, sorry, go on.
Literally getting your head around, when I'm holding this miniature toilet, I'm referring to a full-size toilet. And when I'm showing you a picture of a toilet, it's that linking, that logical linking of this means this. Yeah. And actually, you forget you've got to learn that.
If you then move on to like the toilet symbols of the man and the woman, they're the next step of saying like an outline. So we use like black and white images or traffic lights, just changing the color of the image, especially in like central London now. And they've changed a lot of them from the people to different gender identity markers. And the only thing that tells you whether to stop or to go is the color of the light, and it's no longer a man standing still and a man walking. And then you move on to...
I feel sorry for the red people who are literally being thrown out in front of the cars. It's only the green people who are kept safe.
Exactly. And then you move on to your words and your phrases and your sentences. But actually, there's so much more before we get to those. And you might see in, say, like a reception classroom or Key Stage 1, there's pictures everywhere. They often have like class visual timetables, and then all around the class where you put away the toys, there'll be like a picture of blocks for
Yeah.
where the blocks go. By the time you get to Key Stage 2, it's all moved on to here's just a word. This is the label for this object.
Yeah.
So if you haven't caught up to that, or if your reading isn't at that level yet, then you can no longer put anything away.
No, I'm just trying to imagine if we took our phones are that reception thing. Yeah. I open it up and I look for a symbol. I want to take a photo. So I'm going to click on the icon with the camera icon. Now just imagine your phone with just the words.
Yeah,
no
absolutely.
Images on your home screen, just words. That would be horrible.
But then if you imagine from a child who, for example, a non-speaking child who's yet to learn to read, they're opening that phone and they're not just seeing words, they're seeing words in a different language.
Yes.
It's not a language that they can understand yet. And it isn't to say that they don't understand the English language. It's just that their way of communicating isn't through the written word at that point.
Yes.
So it's like opening your phone and only seeing it in Chinese characters or Mandarin.
Many years ago, in the Nokia 3210 era, for those who remember it, on the Nokia 5110, there was a game called Worm or Snake. And you used to play it. Yeah, you used to play the snake. It wasn't there on the 3210. Really disappointing. And then somebody sent me a text message which said, if you push menu 3 sync to 3 or something, it unlocks the game. I was like, really? So I watched the phone and I pushed menu 3 settings, and it was basically shortcuts in the menu. And it was like, blah, blah. And then literally I realized the second one was languages. And if I pushed that final button, it would have set my phone to Greek. So I just went, I'm not doing that. However, I am forwarding it on to everyone I know.
Yeah, we used to change each other's phone languages, for fun, and you'd never be able to find your way back to English.
No, because somebody did message me 3 weeks later when they finally found someone who spoke the language it got changed into to change their language back to English, and then called me a very rude word. But it took them 3 weeks to be able to do that, which I found very entertaining. But again, it illustrates the exact point. That person can read, they can do all of this stuff, but what's in front of them, they are unable to access.
Yeah. And we often, if we give children, young people, we give them the symbols level, the pictures, the illustrations, and we assume that they're able to understand that connection between a real life toilet and a picture of a toilet, when in reality, often they can't, and they haven't got through those initial phases yet. And until you teach them those steps, actually giving them an illustration of a toilet is completely useless.
Generally, I mean, it's much better these days because generally every toilet is white. But back in the 70s and 80s, when we had some really interesting coloured toilets, you look at it going, well, my toilet's not white. My toilet's salmon pink, or that horrible, bright, horrible solary yellow, or that very random brown toilets. So you're literally going, well, that's not my toilet. So you've got to, there's a certain element of going, it's the idea of a toilet, not an actual physical toilet that you will visit. It's that disconnect.
One of the reasons I set up Discover was so I do all of my illustrations myself, was because as a neurodivergent person, I see a picture of a stick man doing something, and I really struggle to understand how that's me doing that thing. So one of the reasons I started drawing for Discover was to show little caricatures doing things, people that I saw out on the street or people that I'm friends with, and them doing the actions, because I found it so much easier to relate to a picture of a person doing something than a stick man doing something, which is again another level of that communication that for me is really difficult, making that step. And I'm mostly verbal, and I sometimes mute, but mostly verbal. And I use, the spoken word, and I use those black and white line drawings. I can find the toilet when I'm out and about using looking for a stick man. But actually, I really struggle with that step between illustrations that are coloured and filled in to the illustrations that are just a black and white line.
Yes. It makes sense. It does make sense that you kind of have to look at that. And I know that there are lots of children who struggle with emojis because they are very accentuated and exaggerating. You're going, yeah, my face isn't that color. My face isn't doing that. My face, I'm not angry. I'm not doing that. And also, as someone said, really obvious, is your emotions are feelings. And they're called feelings because you feel them. So it's not necessarily on your face.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of your body is feeling it. So again, so there are children who look at emojis and they can label every single emoji, but they do not relate that to themselves.
Yeah, and the same can be said for using visuals in the classroom or at home when you're learning, is what level are they actually able to use and understand relates to real life, and what is just a picture. It's like the blurred line between when children read books with their parents, and there's one at the moment that a child I'm working with loves, where the fruit, every time the kids go to bed at night, the fruit get out of the fruit bowl and they all have a party, and then they go back into the fruit bowl in the morning. For some children, what they see in the book is reality, and they think, they go to bed and actually the fruit in their fruit bowl is coming alive. And for some kids, this is just a story, this is just words that are being said, but there is a line there to be kind of explored with young people, and whether that relates to them using visuals as well.
Yeah, I think it is. What you infer from that, and especially with stuff like the Elf on the Shelf, where every night something does happen, and if you aren't quite old enough to twig that it's probably someone doing it to the elf, not the elf doing it, again, it can really blur those lines. And my nephew, he struggled with, going off topic as always with a podcast, in a program, somebody would die or they'd get injured, but they see them in another film. So that kind of understanding of if you hurt yourself badly or you die, you don't just pop back.
Yes.
You don't
understanding that it, and when you watch something again, some children, if you watch a film or you watch a TV program and it resets back to the beginning, but the person was hurt or died at the end, but they've watched it again, and then the person is no longer hurt or passed away when they restart the film or the TV program. Also a strange one.
Yes, and it's some people going, that makes sense. If some children, they struggle with this, and probably in the same way that everyone thinks young people struggle with violence in games. Most children do not struggle with violence in games. They get it's a game and then they realize. But there are some who do, but it's a much smaller number than people think struggle.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. It's well, I know that this is separate. Me, playing with like a video game controller is not the same. And then if you take those same children into a kitchen and you ask them to be careful with the knife, they probably will be really careful with the knife because they can understand the real world consequence of using a sharp knife as opposed to a video game controller.
Yes. But yeah, you take, as an adult, you take so many things for granted with all these different connections that happen.
Mm-hmm.
You literally, and I can't even think back. I'm literally, the whole stickman thing has got me thinking, did I struggle with a stickman? Have I? No. But I can't reach, probably a stage I went through early on in life, no recollection, or the visuals weren't even there then. But we just take these things for granted as adults that if I just show you this, you'll completely understand what I mean.
One of the interesting things that comes up when we teach visual communication is you're always told to model without expectation, to model without expecting the child to communicate in that same way. So you could be modeling to use a visual timetable or how to use a core board, and you could be modeling it for months, and you have to sit there and say, okay, it's okay if they don't respond. But it can get really frustrating, and you can sit there being like, but it makes so much sense. Why would you need the toilet, so just get the picture of the toilet. But you have to remember where you sit in that hierarchy of communication. So we sit at the moment, in our current state, we sit at the top level. We're able to communicate in sentences. But even just going down one level and only communicating using short phrases, we'd probably really struggle to understand what we wanted to say or what we were hearing from somebody else, because it's such a big jump. And then if you think, I'm teaching at level of sentences, but the child is learning at the level of small world objects, we're 6 phases apart. And actually that frustration that you feel, they probably feel it too, because
Yes.
you're speaking another language, pointing at things that they don't understand and expecting them to do something about it.
Yes. That's the sort of thing is, a completely different thing, another segue, is the idea of problem aware and problem unaware.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking of heating and plumbing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Unaware what my problem is, I've got no heating.
Yep.
Yeah. So you're going, I've got nothing, my house is cold. And you learn about it and you go, oh, I might need my boiler service. There's probably something wrong with my boiler. Oh, now I need a boiler. And the boiler's now in my head. And now I know what my problem is. It's probably my boiler.
Mm-hmm.
If you need a toilet, at which point did I add the word toilet into that sentence? At which point did I know that when I have this feeling in my body, I need to access something called a toilet?
Mm-hmm.
I'm now aware that I need a toilet, like I was aware I needed a boiler. But
Mm-hmm.
before that, it's like, I need to empty my bladder. I
And
don't
you
know
also
where
have
I'm going to
to-
empty it.
Yeah, you also have to be aware that the I can never say this word,
Introception.
introception of particularly autistic people, but other neurodivergences and disabilities as well, is often quite skewed to one end of the spectrum. So I have extremely heightened introception. So I always need the toilet. I'm always hungry. I'm always thirsty. But in some children and young people, adults, it can be the complete opposite end, where they don't feel it until their body reacts to it. So they don't feel that they need the toilet until they've wet themselves.
Yes.
And it's then, well, how do you identify a feeling that you can't show them? You can't point and say, you feel like this in this part of your body. And so now you need to go to the toilet and you need to perform this action, because there isn't that feeling for them.
No. And I remember asking my daughter, getting in the car, do you need a toilet? No. 20 minutes later, I need a toilet. Okay, you were very literal with my question there. When I said, do you need a toilet? You literally went, no, because I don't feel it right now. What I really should have asked, and what the question I'm really asking is, do you need a toilet right now? Or do you think you're probably going to need a toilet in the next hour or two?
Which is a really difficult concept to come across. Time in itself. Often when we teach visual timetables, we're saying, okay, you're going to do this now, and then you're going to do something else. And there's the whole now and next board of, now we do this, next we do that. But understanding that those things, those 2 pictures that I've now put in front of you, aren't happening at the same time. We're not blowing bubbles on the toilet. We're blowing bubbles and then we're going to the toilet. It's really difficult.
Yeah. And it just, that's it. I need to get angry. I went, she's answering the question I'm asking, not extrapolating my possible meaning from it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just learning that, I have to be much more aware of the questions I'm asking.
Yes.
In that sort of way. And it's you can be that very literal. And you said you might not realise a child needs a toilet till they've wet themselves, or it might be until they get that really obvious feeling
Mm-hmm.
that they need to go now. And at that point, they might be dysregulated because they've suddenly got this feeling they're going, oh, which as soon as you're dysregulated, your communication ability drops as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then if normally you communicate using photographs, but suddenly you're so desperate and dysregulated, actually you need to go all the way back down to real world objects. And we often assume that just because a child is able to communicate using illustrations or pictures when they're regulated, that they'll be able to use those same illustrations and pictures when they're dysregulated. But I don't think I've ever met an adult who can articulate themselves as well when they're really upset as when they're perfectly regulated. But we expect children, young people to do that.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. You sit there and as an adult, I'm really lucky. I was doing this podcast and I reflect back on so many things with my kids and going, yeah, that's on me, that one. My expectations were up here.
Mm-hmm.
I expected them to be, you can do this on a good day, you should be able to do this on a bad day, not actually going, yeah, you can't right now. I never took that into consideration. And using that has really helped is just loads of things have just helped me that when actually things aren't great, not just for my kids, for anyone, just simplify the language, change things down. It makes a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. The simplification that we kind of when we're in those heightened levels of anxiety or anger or upset, actually most of our brain is focused on being in that emotion, and there's not much left for logical thought.
No.
Especially logical thought in something new, in learning a new language. So if I said to you, okay, you can be upset, but you can only be upset talking French, that would be really difficult for a lot of people if French is your second language. So for some children, we're saying, okay, you're really good at using pictures and symbols. Now you're upset. I want you to now be able to translate it using black and white illustrations. And it's like that we're making things so much harder than they need to be.
Yes. It's unrelatable. This black and white. Are you this stick man? Are you this stick man? I'm not a stick man.
Yeah. Unlike the Julia Donaldson book where I am a stick man.
Yes.
Which is what just came into my head.
Yes. But literally, if I was really upset in French, I'd be really doomed because literally I only know to say comme si, comme ça, which means so.
Yeah.
So I couldn't say I'm upset or anything.
I could probably tell you the word sad, and that would just be it. I'd be able to give you random words, not in sentences.
Yeah.
But yeah, that I think the translation to how we, even though it's not quite the same because we are teaching them to communicate in English, there is kind of that language barrier between what we're saying to them and what they're able to comprehend, and then what they're able to say.
And that's also
in turn to us.
Is the word almost that saying I'm sad in French or saying I'm sad in English, before you can say any of them, you have to understand the kind of concept to use that word correctly. So learning it in English is like the final step. In reality, you've got to go all these three, or literally understanding using a toilet. The word I need a toilet is that final bit. You've just learned it in English. Learning it in French is the exact same level in reality. You still have to understand the concept and everything. And that all happens miles before we get to the words, I need a toilet.
Yeah, so often children, young people will learn how to ask for things. So they'll be able to communicate what they want. So they'll be able to say, I want food, I want drink. But they won't be able to say, I feel hungry or I feel thirsty. Because for them, they know that the action of saying, I want food will give them food. Because when they've been taught, when it's been modeled to them, if someone models, I want snack, they're then given a snack. So if they say, I want snack, they get a snack. Why would they then say, I feel hungry? Because at that point, it doesn't provide anything in return. In the same way, I go playground. Okay, cool, we're going to go to the playground now. But saying, I need to run around. Well, if I just say I go playground, then you're going to take me to the playground because it has a natural consequence.
Yes.
But a lot of the things we say don't have consequences. We just say them for the sake of conversation.
Yes.
Which I find very hard as an autistic person.
My daughters would literally get bored and ask for food. It was like just another activity.
Yeah.
And you're going, but you're not hungry. And they're going, but I want food. And there wasn't a connection between that feeling of hunger in their body and then having food. It was like, I've got nothing to do. I'll have crisps. Yeah. It was like, to them, it was like painting or colouring or watching a film. It was another activity that they'd learnt. Can I paint? Can I have a packet of crisps? Can I have this? And I go, yeah, but you're not hungry. And they literally go, I can see it in their heads going, but it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, because often when we teach that initial communication, it's need-based. It's, this is what I want to do now, so I'm going to ask for it. But often all the conversations we have as adults, not very many of them are need-based. It's gossip. It's what we did yesterday. It's what happened to your cat this morning. Like it's not what you need or want.
Talking of cats, where is your cat right now? Because I think it is above the camera somewhere.
Yes, he just walked past. He's now settled. We had to attach a bed to my desk so that he would sit on the shelf on my desk rather than on my computer. Talking of struggling with different languages, my cat has worked out how to log into my computer. We're not sure how. We think maybe the fingerprint scan works on his paws, but he's also worked out how to change it so that as I type, none of the letters come up. It only comes up with symbols. So he can walk over my computer and I can then no longer type in any language. It's just symbols, and I have to completely restart my computer. So he now has a desk bed. Yeah.
Wow. I was watching Kerry earlier and literally I could see the cat jumped up on a desk and Kerry was going, please don't knock anything over. I could see it in your face. And I was thinking, there's a whole lot of communication went on there.
Yes.
But it's my understanding, because I have a cat, I understood that cat could have done anything it wanted because it's a cat.
Yes.
Which comes
back to
this...
very large cat as well.
Again, the understanding. So the moment I saw the cat in the background earlier, I went, oh, there's a cat in the room. Could go, anything could happen. Could jump somewhere. But you kind of, I have that experience. I saw the cat. Technically, it's not a real cat because it's on a screen.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a cat in the real world. It's a cat. It's like a video of a cat.
Yes.
But I inferred a load of information based on all my experiences.
So I had an incident, sounds a bit dramatic, the other day. So we're currently having our house renovated. I say having, my partner is renovating our house. And last week, my partner and his dad, who has been a tradie, he's done plastering, plumbing, etc., were redoing the bathroom. It was a really overwhelming experience for me. There were people in my house. There were people in my space. I was masking all the time because there was strange, well, not strange, but there was not my partner and my cat in my house. And I was asked by my partner's dad whether I liked the tiles in the bathroom. And my response was, yes, that's why I chose them. But the intended question was something along the lines of, do you like them now that we've put them in? How do you feel about the bathroom that we've put in? But at the time, my response was, I answered the question. Of course I like them, that I chose them because I like them. And it wasn't until my partner pulled me aside later, and he's neurotypical, and said that wasn't what he was asking. And actually it came across quite rude. And I was like, but I answered the question.
That's the thing is, when we ask questions, we miss out lots of words because we're lazy.
Yeah.
And so we ask a very simple question, which is actually, if you just read that question aloud or just look at that question on its own, as it is, with no context, it's one question. What you actually ask is often a very different question. Mm-hmm. It's like the question, how are you? Doesn't really mean how are you, does it?
No.
It's basically saying, hi, how are you? Great. There's a lovely video of two workmen who do the usual nod as they walk past each other. The one goes, can we just not do the nod? Can we actually have a conversation? So they sit down and have a conversation. So then they get back on with work and they're going, I don't know what to do when I walk past you now because I can't nod because we've had a conversation. So I don't know what. It's really, you kind of just got to have to suck it up, this whole how are you thing. Because otherwise everyone just gets awkward if you don't follow the social norm.
Yes, I have far too many neighbours for being autistic because they always want to talk. But they don't want to talk about anything. They just want to talk, which is a completely unknown concept. I don't understand it. It doesn't make sense to me. Why? I can see you. I acknowledge you're there. I don't need a conversation about whether or not it's raining to decide, how to go on with my day.
Because I can look up and go, yes, it is. Or I can look at my app and go, yes, you're right. It will rain this afternoon. Thank you.
Yeah, but I think it works quite well when we then take communication and visuals and we take them out and about, or we're using them with our children and young people, and we say, okay, I personally, we're going out, we're going swimming. Actually, bringing the visuals is it's a bit inconvenient. So I'm now going to just talk to you in the way that is good for me. And I think neurotypicals as adults often do this to autistic adults. And they say, well, I'm going to talk and say, how are you? And have this conversation. I'm going to ask you whether you like the tiles you chose, because that's the conversation I want to have. And maybe not consider that from the other perspective, that's either really difficult or it makes no sense.
I also sometimes think that neurotypicals say things like that to avoid silence.
Yes.
Because I'm quite happy with silence. Because partly I realise I'm often in my own head. I'm not actually in the world, if that makes sense. I'm in my own head, doing my own thoughts, doing my own stuff, going blah, 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 blah. So the fact that silence around me means I'm not distracted by my own thoughts. Whereas I'm not saying you neurotypicals are, but it is, I think for some people, they don't like silence and they have all these lovely silence fillers.
Yes, far too many of them. I think also I discovered maybe about a year into my relationship with my partner that he doesn't have things going on in his head all the time. My head is constantly busy. There's constantly things going on. It's like there's a cat running around and knocking things off shelves all the time. And it's constantly exploding with thoughts and opinions and debates and stuff. But he sometimes will be like, "Oh, what are you thinking about?" And he's said nothing. Like, what do you mean you're not thinking about anything? It's like, well, if I'm not actively thinking, there's nothing going on. But that concept is just completely wild to me.
I know I love watching these videos on like YouTube or Facebook where people going, I asked my partner what's going on in their head and he said nothing. And almost like that person's having an argument going, it cannot be nothing. There has to be something. Properly getting agitated. And I'm going, yeah, I think there are people who I sometimes shut off. I literally, it's almost like I'm asleep. There are times where I'm looking out the window and I'm just not even there. I don't know where I can't even tell you where I am. I'm just there, consciously nowhere. But that's very rare. Generally, I am just tangenting off the wall. Any random thought, going through stuff on the day, going through scenarios I wish had happened, or anything, but never, very rarely, unless I'm really tired, generally never silence. And we do have to remember, with all of this communication stuff, there's regulated, there's dysregulated, but there's also, is what's going on in my head much more interesting than what's going on in the outside world when we're trying to have this communication?
Yeah.
That's another reason a child might not engage.
Yeah, there may be something going on for them that's far more interesting. One of the children I'm working with has just learned the significance of pointing, but he's not understood yet that usually we use pointing to communicate with somebody else. So he'll be having a conversation in his head, he'll be chatting away to himself, and he'll be pointing around the room at things that he's looking at. It's an interesting way for me to now see when he's busy in his head, because if I go and interrupt him to try and communicate, he's already he's already got something going on. He's already having a conversation. He's already looking at things around the room. But I've decided that we're now going to observe the fact that there's a train. And I'm going to say, I see train, and expect him to care, when actually
you are literally walking you're in a social event, there's three people having a conversation, or two people, and you've literally just walked in and started talking over the top of whatever was going on.
Yeah. And we often just assume that because we've decided it's time to communicate, that the child is also ready to communicate. And often they're not, because we know children, neurotypical or not, are already very, distracted. There's always, something shiny, something new, something colourful that's going on. So why would they just sit and talk to us about, yes, I can see there's a train, thank you for pointing out the obvious? Because their communication level in what we consider as communication is still very low, but quite possibly in their head they've noted that there's a train, they've decided it's going really fast, but actually the thing that they're doing is far more interesting, so they're going to carry on doing that, and it doesn't matter that I've told them that there's a train.
Because that's a whole load of social skills to understand that actually what's going on in your head apparently isn't as important than what's going on in the outside world.
Yeah.
You've got to learn that. And I do find that, and interesting, I still sit there and think, I haven't really thought that enough through, but I know with my children, if I want them to do something, I want to do it when it's good for me. And they've got their own life. They've got their own plans. They've got, my daughter plans her day. And if I say I need to do this, it's like, well, I can't today. It's because she's had a plan for her day. She's laid in bed. She's worked out how her day is looking, and that's what's going to happen. And I can't really interrupt it without lots of warning. I can't say, you need to empty the dishwasher now. That is completely... If I say, I need you to empty the dishwasher today, when is good for you? She'll go, I can do it after lunch.
Yeah.
I generally get the dishwasher done after lunch. If I try and get to do it right now, complete argument.
Yep.
Anyway, we need to get back to visuals because we are segueing off all over the place. Let's get back to visuals. But in reality, this does apply. It's ready to communication. Now let's get back into the communication part of visuals.
Yeah, we can do that.
So I think you sent me some information, and one of you is how visuals are often misused or misrepresented.
Yeah, so we often use visuals for the sake of using visuals. So when a child is first kind of being put on the pipeline of diagnosis in EHCP, it's often, well, they should have a visual timetable because they struggle with transition, so we'll give them one. They should have visuals all around the classroom because we should give them because that's what they need, right? But in reality, we're not stopping and considering where in that hierarchy of communication they sit and what they actually want to communicate about, because we often communicate for a purpose or because we enjoy it. We're not maybe considering that with those children, young people. But we also have to think in a classroom, say a mainstream classroom, you've got 30 children. You've probably got at least 2 children with some kind of developmental language delay. You may have someone with an autism or ADHD diagnosis. You've maybe got someone with a physical disability. And each of the children needs a different support system.
Yeah.
So when we bring in a new set of visuals and we say, right, this child needs to learn using a visual timetable. In a previous classroom I worked in, mainstream, there were 2 children with high support needs. So they both needed a station in the classroom with a visual timetable on the wall, and they both used different levels of communication. One of them was still on photos, and one of them had moved on to illustrations. But then when the staff are working with them, you might have like a lanyard around your neck, and often teachers or TAs will have lanyards with a bunch of visuals on them, but they're only relevant to one child. Or they'll say, right, I need to have visuals so I'm available. I can talk to any of the kids in the classroom. So they have lots of different visuals that then when they're talking to a child who's got lower level of understanding, they've got to flick through and find the visual that they need, find the thing that's most appropriate for them before they can even say anything.
Yep.
And I guess it's thinking about what is most practical for in a mainstream or a specialist classroom. A specialist classroom, you might have 10 children who all have slightly different communication needs, who all need to communicate using a slightly different method, but you need to be available and able to do all of those at once. So often we become lazy because we haven't got the time to sort out, 10 different communication methods. So we just stick to the ones that are easiest, like visual timetables, core boards, and we say, well, most of the children can use those, so we'll stick to that because it's easier, because it takes up less time, because it means you can communicate with the most children. But then we do lose out those couple of kids that don't communicate in that way. I hope some of that made sense.
And I suppose that sort of thing, that's the thing, there are, to me, as a non-pictorial image communicator, they're all the same. And I know that may have just people going, they're not, they're very, very, very different. But for me, not really understanding, being told, try visual timetable, try this, and you try 1 or 2 things. And if that child doesn't engage in that way, you just, I'll go, that doesn't work.
Yes.
It's not that simple. It's not if this, do this. It's if this, work out where they are on that, as you said, that hierarchy of that communication. Where are they up to? Because it might be I have to use photos, or it might be I can use symbols.
Yes. It could be, so a visual timetable, say you're using it, it's not working, and you say, okay, they don't understand it, they're not doing transitions. We'll maybe go back a step and try objects of reference.
Yeah.
But objects of reference takes a lot of time to set up, because you've got to find an object that's relevant to that child for that specific item. So, for example, toilet, maybe you do have a little toy toilet that you can use, but actually in most classrooms you don't. So you go and get an empty toilet roll. Okay, now that's one thing out of maybe 20 activities that a child's going to complete that day. Yep. You've now got to go and find a spoon to show breakfast, a fork for lunch. You've got to find maybe a ball for playtime, a slime for when you're going and doing a sensory activity. And you've got to go through all of these activities. And it takes a lot of time and a lot of energy. And you might find that after 5 days of using it, it doesn't work. And you've got to go and try something else. And if, say, you get a new class in September and you've got 10 children who need your support, and you try something with 10 children and then you have to change it for all 10 children, that's a lot of work. And you can see why people get fed up or why people end up using just a singular method of communication for a classroom.
But it's also is let's say you have a symbol for maths which has a set square and a protractor on or something. But and that's the symbol for maths, because it's very a mathematical thing, that image.
Mm-hmm.
But they're just using number blocks.
Yes.
That symbol of maths and what they're doing has there's no link. There's no link between that and there's no correlate. That's the word. Thank you.
So I was watching your hand making a correlation.
Yeah, okay, there's a something between them, a correlation. And the same is when you're talking of English, you're doing literacy. What does that image look like? And what is it actually you're doing? Is it you are kind of creating a story together on the whiteboard? Therefore, there is no writing, there is no pencil, there's no book.
It's quite an interesting point, actually, because we sometimes will say, okay, this is English, we're going to go into an English lesson now. And we then stop communicating during the lesson. And we don't tell them that actually the lesson is going to consist of 3 different parts.
It's just, here's the lesson.
Yeah, it's just, here's the lesson. And now you're going to sit here for an unspecified amount of time, because time is really difficult for kids to understand. And you're going to do these activities. But when that activity is finished and you think you've completed that lesson, actually you're going to be given another activity and it's still part of that same lesson. And then you're going to get another activity and that's still part of that same lesson. So even though you're only at one point on your visual timetable, you've done 3 different activities.
Yes.
So sometimes we then need to think, okay, so English today is going to be read a book, draw a picture, write a story.
Yep.
So we then need a visual or some kind of indication for each of those things.
My wife has found in her school that sand timers really help.
Yes, very visual, very useful.
And it might be that you literally, I'm going to say you have an hour-long sand timer. So you can do English for an hour. So you turn it over and you get that first activity, but you kind of can look and go, well, it's not finished. So you can help them understand that although we finished it, we've still got lots of time left for English.
Yes. Another one that is really good for when you've got specific activities. So say you need a child to spell out 10 words. You could take 10 coins or 10 pieces of dry pasta or 10 blocks and then draw 10 spaces on a piece of paper. And each time they do a spelling, they can place one of the objects. And it's a very physical, okay, I've done this activity. I can move this item to over here. That's finished. And then do the next spelling. And it's then got that visual element, but also they can do something physically, which is quite a nice separation between the tasks as well.
Because again, you are kind of getting them to abstract in the head. We've got 3 activities. I'm on the first one. There's 2 left. We can do that in our head. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You get to a book and you go, oh, there's 22 chapters. And you kind of know, I'm in chapter 5. So you know how far away, because you've got that concept in your head. To get that concept, you kind of need to go through a more practical version, which is putting those things. There are going to be 10 things. So as you do these activities, put a thing in there, and it helps you visually see how complete. And when I get to that last one,
how far through something you are.
Yeah. I never thought of that.
I find it really useful, especially with non-speaking children, who often I'll say for myself, oh, just one more. We'll just do one more. But to them, their current understanding verbally is of one word. It's not of me saying 4 or 5 words. So when I say, oh, we'll just do one more, the number 1 has got lost on them.
Yeah.
Because it's in amongst so many other words that they don't currently understand. So I'm saying it for me rather than for them. I could say just one more and then we could do 5 more spellings. And that translation wouldn't necessarily have happened. But if I've shown 5 coins and I've said, okay, we've done 4 of them, and I'll be like, okay, look, 1 left. one more, and then it has a little bit more concept. There's a bit more comprehension of what I've said because there's a visual aid to go with it.
Yes. Yeah, that one more is always interesting. You always do one more, then you go, and one more, and one more,
And
and
you
one
can get
more.
away with a lot when you're speaking a different language to the person you're working with.
But also, once you hear one more, and they learn that it's not going to be one more, it's 20 more. The next time they hear one more, they're like, no.
Yeah.
No.
They then don't trust the words that you're saying.
No.
Yeah. It's actually interesting talking of the difference between me saying, oh, we'll just do one more, and actually showing them a visual of or an image of one. When we work with verbal children, we use far more words than they're able to understand or use themselves. And there was a study done in 2019 by Ohio University, and they worked out how many words a child was exposed to based on how many books they were read. And they basically reckoned that most children by age 5 will have been exposed to 300,000 words. But if they read 5 books a day, it would go all the way up to 1.4 million words. And that we do this with children who are verbal, and we expect them to listen and to hear these words and then maybe pick up on some of them, ask what they mean. But when we use visuals, we only use the visuals that the child understands at that moment. And we maybe don't include enough visuals for them to have that extended vocabulary, the equivalent of the 300,000 words by age 5. We're not showing them that many visuals for the in ratio to the amount that they're using.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So like with a core board, you might start with 8 words. Once they know 3, 4, 5 of those words, you need to make the core board bigger and move up to say 20 words, because otherwise there's no extension to their language. They're just stuck with what you've given them. But in reality, in a verbal child, they say 5 words. We're speaking to them using hundreds.
So you always want, if they've learned every single word on that core board, you need to double the size of it. You want that
Yeah,
curiosity.
or use more core boards.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it is that, yeah, that makes sense. That you're kind of going, well, what's that? What's this? You want them to have that curiosity. Also, you are going to start, although they might not be choosing that word, I'm guessing you could be doing something referring to that symbol that I am doing this, and you're pointing to it. They've never used it. They've gone, so she's doing that. That points to that. That must be a link. I'm guessing that's how you teach new words.
There's a really good example, actually. So when you teach new visuals, it's all modeling. It's all me saying things and you maybe picking it up as and when. So one of the children I work with loves books, loves reading them. And so he can request he's got an iPad with a grid application with basically a bunch of core boards. And he can navigate through the different folders and he can ask for different things. So he quite confidently will say, I read story, or Kerry reads story, and I'll then pick up a book. We've started introducing the idea that he could say, I read monster story, or I read bear story, to choose a specific book. And we've been doing this for a couple of weeks now. I've got his parents doing it as well, and he's got a few favourite books that he can request following what I've already modelled. So nothing new, just what I've already shown him. And then out of the blue yesterday, we've been reading Dr. Seuss's Oh, the Places You'll Go. And on the front cover, it's got a picture of a little guy in a basket attached to a big balloon, a little bit like a hot air balloon. We've been reading it. The book's now been put back on the bookshelf. Out of the blue yesterday, we're sat eating his dinner and he goes, I read, and then starts looking in transport. And he finds hot air balloon, goes, hot air balloon, and then story. I've never said hot air balloon to him. It doesn't say it anywhere in the book, but he's found the word using the vocabulary that he's got available to him. And he's now said, I read hot air balloon story. And I knew exactly what he meant and I went and got the book. But if he didn't have those words available to him, we probably would have had a meltdown because he'd be trying to find a book that he can't see. It's not there in front of him. It's over on the bookshelf. He probably would have got quite upset over the fact that he wasn't able to read the book that he wanted to. Yep. Because I would have just gone, oh, well, this is the story that I've got. I guess you want to read this.
Yes.
But having that extended language. he was able to find the word he wanted.
One of the things you mentioned there is you're using it and they're using it at home.
Yes.
That is really, really important, because in reality, at home, at school, wherever you are, everyone is exposed to the verbal, word, vocal language, and you hear it all the time. It's the same. And you pick it up and you learn that this communication is everywhere. Whereas if you're just doing this visual communication in school and you go home, you're never going to kind of really embed it. Because you're at
really
home,
good point.
You're going to be trying to communicate another way because you haven't got those symbols. You'll try something else and you'll try that, and you go to school and you'll be still trying to communicate that way because that's how I communicate at home. You kind of want to, I'm going to say reliance sounds like the wrong word, but in reality it is. I rely on my words to communicate. I don't just go,
but
and you get what I mean.
If you take a child from home where they can do the smallest thing, and parents are incredibly intuitive, they see a child doing something and they know that that child needs the toilet, or they see the child doing something and they know that they need, they're uncomfortable in their top, or they need a drink, or they need to go and run outside. But when you then put them in a classroom with teachers that haven't known them for that long, or with potentially a supply teacher or whatever else, that child is expecting you to pick up on those same signals. Your communication method is completely different. But then in reverse, you introduce a new, more complex communication system in school because you need to bridge that gap of the intuitiveness of a parent.
Yes.
You're bridging that gap. You bring in this new communication system and you don't introduce it to the parents, or you introduce it in a very basic way and you say, look, here's a call board, this is how you use it. And you don't actually teach the parents, say, how to teach the child new words or how to form longer sentences. And you just say, look, start using this at home. The child goes home, but they don't need to use the communication board because their parent intuitively already knows what they need, because they've already spent so much time with them. And so the communication gets lost. So even when the parents could kind of reinforce using this as a new method of communication and adding it to that intuitiveness, kind of noticing that a child needs to have a drink and then modeling, I need water or I want drink, and showing it to them, would really benefit their communication. But if the parents are never shown that or taught that, or only given the very basic knowledge, they're not able to continue pushing their child's communication.
I have been in situations where I've kind of watched a family and the parents are so in tune to their child's needs, or they've got a routine, that there is no communication happening.
Yeah.
Because they're anticipating, and you're literally going, actually, you have removed all opportunity to communicate. So you're never going to develop those skills at any level, because you know that after this happens, and after that, they like that. You're never getting them to ask. You're never getting them to go, I need this, or I want this. You actually want to kind of force those communication skills that you are doing it for them. You're trying to get them to be more independent.
It's giving them an opportunity to be independent as well, because I might go up to a child and say, I think they need something to drink. And I might say, you want water? And they might turn around and say, actually, I want juice. But if I just immediately give them water, they don't have that opportunity to question it. Yeah. They don't have the option. Or the same with snacks. We'll often say, okay, here's your snack. But if I put 3 snacks out and I say, Dale wants crisps, and I give you crisps, you could push those away and that would be enough communication. Or I could then model, Dale wants grapes, and offer you grapes. And then I can respond to that and keep going until we find something using that modeling communication and mixing the physical object with that visual. Yeah. Because if I just give a child a snack and they don't like it, they push it away, they scream, they say no, whatever their method of communication is. If I then add in a visual and I say, Dale wants grapes, and then I show you a picture of grapes and then I give you the grapes, you can then start to make those links between the physical object and that picture that I've shown you.
Yep.
And then you can still push it away or say no. And slowly over time, I can start not showing you the object and just showing you the picture and saying, Dale want grapes or crisps? And you can then look at them
Yeah.
and you can choose, even though there's no longer those objects there.
Yes.
Something that, as a parent, you would probably just go, I know that they don't like crisps, I'm going to give them grapes.
But you actually need to create, going back to like the books, you need to create those opportunities to communicate.
Yes. Yeah.
And it really needs to be that consistent way of communicating between home and school.
Yeah. And then you can progress together as well. Because if you introduce new language at home, you want them to be able to use that same language at school. You want them to keep using it, and to, now that this child has said the word hot air balloon with his talker, I know that he knows how to find it. So maybe at school, if they're doing a science project, they might be able to introduce hot air balloons as part of that project, because it's now something that he's kind of considered, and it's something they can then build on in a way that maybe you're not able to do at home.
And I suppose the thing that I think parents really understand is, if you know your child well and you've got that intuition and you can read them, rather than going, oh, he needs a toilet, then having to have a conversation via symbols about that just slows things down.
Yeah.
It does at the beginning. But in reality, you're relying on your intuition for all communication. And as your child gets older, will develop a lot more independence and things they want to have control over and decisions. And you want to be able to give them that communication. You won't be able to intuitively know everything. You will know certain things. So yes, the communication will slow down at home. You won't just go, he needs a toilet. You'll have to get the symbols out and have that conversation via the symbols, which will be like, I know he needs a toilet, but you have to. Because that way, you know that actually, if they start asking for the toilet when they recognize it, you can teach them that you've recognized they need a toilet, and that feeling is toilet needing. So you helping them learn that interoception. But you're then meaning that they are more independent. So when they're at school, or even if they actually get to go to a friend's house, because they can communicate their needs. That's the sort of thing is, if you rely on your intuition, it kind of means you have to be there all the time.
But you also then can't teach anything that isn't intuition based.
Yes.
So if I'm teaching a child how to read, and I'm teaching them each of those individual sounds, I need to know that if I show them a letter or a sound spelling and I say a sound, that they're making those connections. If I'm teaching them maths and I'm showing them numbers and then I'm counting out how many blocks, I need them to understand that those things can be connected. And if we don't introduce the visual communication in areas that are very relatively simple or obvious, or happen multiple times a day, then it's going to be really difficult to teach those more complex areas like learning to read or learning to count, because there isn't that communication base for them to work on. We eat all the time. We're constantly getting snacks or eating meals. We go to the toilet multiple times a day. We brush our teeth twice a day. All of these are really good ways to teach the communication method, so it can then be translated to use in more complex areas, like say you only do maths once a day, or you're only doing your phonics lesson 3 times a week. You can then take it to those, things that are further apart, because you've already got such a good base of communication from the concepts that you do all the time regularly.
And also the other thing visual aids do is kind of, it's not giving you a choice, isn't here's a choice, is actually, I have no idea what my options are. So I'm hungry. What do I want to eat? I don't know. Oh, I could have crisps, I could have grapes, or I could have chocolate. Oh, they're my choices. Oh, I feel like grapes today. But if I didn't have that, I might not know what my choices are, which sounds really like, well, no, everyone knows the choices. Is my daughter, who's towards the end of secondary school, I said, what do you want to do over the summer holiday? She went, I don't know, what can we do? Yeah. And she can't kind of get those activities. It's this more abstract level, but she can't get the activities we've done in the past and go, actually, which of these have I liked that we could do this summer?
But
I
also
have to give her
realistic, because she might say, well, I want to go and travel the world, because that is an option. You asked what she wanted to do, and what I want to do is travel the world this summer. But in reality, maybe you're asking, it's going back to that specifics thing. Maybe you're asking, actually, what days out could we do?
Yeah, and in my head, I'm going, you've had lots of summers. We've done lots of activities. Surely you can just pull that out of your head and go, oh, let's do this. And she struggles with that. Is that my problem?
Yeah.
Is that her problem? Well, technically it is her problem that she can't do that, but am I just going to punish her for it? Or am I going to help her teach her ways of maybe... That's the thing. So I've literally gone, okay, I've got to do this. So I've got to get out, not just say what the activities are. I've maybe have to find photos
of the time you've done before, or find a photo of the place you could go. It's the same with food. If I say to a child, okay, it's snack time, and they say, I want crisps, but I'm looking and, I'm in their kitchen and there aren't any crisps, that's then I'm creating an opportunity for a meltdown or for dysregulation, because I've said, well, what do you want? Whereas if I give them those choices and I communicate with them at their level, I can say, okay, here are the different options. You can have biscuit, you can have rice cake, you can have grapes, you can have apple, and they can then choose those things. And it's also within your boundary. So it makes it, I think a lot of times as parents, we know what our kids like, or we know what our kids don't like. And so we can choose for them. But if you give them those boundaries and say, okay, here are the options, they can then choose and make their own decision, and it gives them their autonomy, but it also gives you control, because you still have to make sure that they're safe and that they're healthy and everything else.
But there's a lot more to this very simple communication, that you make so many assumptions, like, oh, you know what's available because you've had a snack yesterday. Yes. But they don't know what is available. They don't know what's in the cupboard right now. There's various reasons. My daughter goes...
And there's also object permanence, whether or not they actually understand that because they can't see an object, that it still exists.
Yes. So my daughter will not probably get up on Sunday until we've been to Tesco, because she knows that once we've been to Tesco, there is apple juice.
A fair assumption.
Yes. So it just, you sit there and you learn, and you're going, yeah, I'm kind of getting... And my daughter is 16 and I'm still learning her rules. But what's interesting is she is also learning her own rules.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing. She can't go, this is me, this is exactly what I need, because she's 16 still, which is still in reality young.
Yeah.
And she hasn't worked out herself, because her world is constantly changing. Every year it's changing. I think it's not until you get to an adult that your life kind of gets a bit more steady and not changing.
And you have control over your own life.
Yes.
Because as a child, we have to remember how much we tell a child they have to do, or when they need to do it. It's like you're saying, if you tell your daughter to unload the dishwasher and you need it done right now, for them, the only element of control they have in that situation is saying, actually, I can do it after lunch. Whereas often we're saying, well, if you do it right now, this is what I want, and this is the control I'm putting over the environment. By giving these children a method of communication that they understand and that they can connect to, say a visual timetable, and it says, we're going to go Bubbles and then we're going to go to the toilet. They then have the autonomy to pick up toilet and put it in front of Bubbles and say, right, actually, I need to go to the toilet, and then we can play Bubbles. And they can take that step. And it just gives them so much more autonomy in their own life, because especially as SEND children, we push them to do things, we take them places, we don't necessarily communicate why we're getting on a bus or why we've walked past the train station, even though usually we go in the train station. We need to give them some context.
Yes. That's the thing. You also, as a child, you build up patterns. I remember my colleague John, his daughter had a meltdown when they went to London, and he couldn't get why. She wanted to go to this restaurant. It's like, but we're not going to the restaurant. Had a huge meltdown. And I'm like, what happened last time she went to London? He went, well, where we went there, we went to the so because we went up there last time and then we went to the restaurant, that is what meant going to London was. So the concept, what does going to London mean? It meant doing X and doing Y. But this time we went to London, they were just going to do X.
Yeah.
Going to London meant the entire thing. So why aren't we doing
that? We're leaving the house, so we're going to school. Okay, but actually the car's broken down, so we're not going to get in the car straight away. We actually have to walk to the bus stop. That can be the simplest thing that causes dysregulation, because actually normality is, I'm in my school uniform, I go and get in the car.
Yes.
But today that's not possible. And we often don't stop and explain that in a way that's understandable. We'll say, the car's broken, we're getting the bus, but haven't then broken that down into visuals and said, okay, car, broken, finding a picture of a broken car, and then going, we go bus, and going and finding a picture of the bus, walking to the bus stop. And it takes, it takes 5-10 minutes longer, but it saves so much time and so much dysregulation for that young person.
And especially if you know your car broke down the evening before, do all of that the evening before.
Yeah, get it all ready. Yeah.
Yes. I'm going to wrap it up.
Sounds good.
And what's interesting, the last bit on symbols, which I am really offended about, is my wife has a symbol which she stuck to her car, which is just a face which says worried, which I personally take as an insult to my driving because she's literally stuck it on the dashboard. I think all that happened is it fell out of her bag and she stuck it on the dashboard to remind her. But I personally have taken it as an insult if she doesn't like my driving.
Maybe you should get a second one to replace it that's like excited.
I might have to laminate it and do everything because that one is yeah. But it is, I literally sort of going, what's wrong with my driving? And the answer was, it fell out of her bag, so she stuck it up there to remind her to take it in. But the problem is it's not going in now because it's now a bit of a joke.
Yeah, it's now got to stay there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
You are welcome. Really enjoyed it. And as always, my guests always share their contact details. So in the show notes, you will find Kerry's contact details. And she's also shared a number of links, so you'll find those as well. And you'll find the show notes wherever you listen to the podcast or on the SENDcast website, which is www.thesendcast.com. So thank you for listening to the show. If you are listening to a platform that allows you to review the podcast or give it a rating, please give it a little review or give it a 5-star rating and let others know what you think. I may even start reading those reviews out at the end of the episodes as well. And if you want to get in touch, let us know your thoughts, suggest topics or anything else, please message us on social media or send an email to hello@thesendcast.com. And the SENDcast is created and produced by us here at B Squared. We help to show the small steps of progress pupils with SEND make, and we help schools to show progress for a wide range of abilities and ages. We have a range of frameworks to suit students from birth all the way up to age 25 and beyond. Our Steps for Life framework assesses functional academic skills, employability skills, and life skills. And for the most complex learners, working with the engagement model, our engagement steps help us build a profile of the student needs and show the progress they are making, however small. Visit the B Squared website or click on the meeting link in the show notes to book a meeting with me to take you through our assessment software. So thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the SENDcast. This is goodbye from me.
Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.